Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 30th episode of the ZEISS Micro Minute, straight from the ZMCC, the ZEISS Microscopy Customer Center in Dublin, California. My name is 𝗦ci𝗰𝗶𝗹𝘀. I'm an EM applications engineer here, and we're here to celebrate the 21st birthday of the EVO Conventional SEM. A conventional scanning electron microscope has a tungsten or a Lab 6 source. It's a thermionic source. That's not as important as the fact that it is now 21 years old. It originally came out in 2004. This is what it looked like when it was released. Take a look at that PC, kind of showing its age there from 2004. Now, I don't know exactly when the birthday of the EVO is, but it's going to be sometime this year, 2025. That makes the EVO 21. Now, 21 is a big milestone here in the United States because that's when you can legally have a beer or any other alcoholic beverage of your choice. So what will we do to celebrate the birthday of a scanning electron microscope? Well, of course, we're going to have some cake and maybe a beer. Now, we can't give these things to the microscope, so what we'll do instead is we're going to take a look at the birthday candles. Now, have you ever seen those birthday candles in the store that claim to make different color flames? I went and bought some, put it on a cake, and we're going to try discovering the magic behind what is going on there. So without further ado, let me present EVO its cake. So here I am, struggling to light some candles. Now these are the candles. We got a blue candle, a green candle, and a purple candle, and they claim to make those color flames. So we've lit it. It's kind of hard to see with the lights on, and of course tomorrow is Valentine's Day, so that explains kind of the cute cake that I was able to find for it. But here, we turn off the lights and, well, that green one is really obvious, isn't it? From this angle, we can get a better look, I think, at that purple one. Seems to be a hint of purple burning at the tip there. The blue one kind of just looks blue. So for comparison, I actually put regular candles on this cake, and we can see how does this line up with what you normally would see. So this is a regular birthday candle. Turning off the lights, notice how much brighter these are. I think this will come up later in our discussion. And let's go back to the color ones so we can see we have our purple, our green, and our blue. So my experiment is I want to stick these into the SEM and I want to see if I can find what is making these different colors. Clearly there must be some additive in here that is behind the magic. But we can't just go ahead and stick a candle into our microscope. We got to do a little bit of sample preparation, but honestly, not much. Here I'm just using a straight razor from the candles that we've took off the cake. And I'm just isolating a small part of the wick and the wax. And these are just coming off the back of those candles. So you can see I've got the parts from those, and that's just a piece of carbon tape right onto our sample holder. And all I need to do for sample preparation here is nothing fancy. I just will take these pieces of the candle and push them down here onto the tape. Just want to secure that a little bit. Also note in the top left of that holder, there's a can tab from that beer that the EVO had. And we're going to start looking at that in the microscope just to get you comfortable with how the imaging is going to go. So here I am finishing pushing those pieces of the candle down. I don't need to do any other preparation besides cleaning this up. I don't want loose particles inside the EVO. So I'm just going to move the candle aside and use a little air blower thing here to blow away the parts that aren't stuck down. And there we are. Now it's ready to stick inside the microscope. So all I need to do is I'm just going to take this sample holder and let me bring it over to our EVO. And here it is. Here's the birthday microscope. I've vented the chamber. Let's take a look at what it looks like to mount a sample in an electron microscope. So here the stage comes out. I don't have to reach in. My sample holder just attaches in one piece. And what I'm doing now is I'm taking a picture of the samples on the stage. I get to use that for navigation. You'll see here when I start operating the microscope how that's done. I just simply close the door and we pump it down. So now let's do our experiment. We're going to turn on the microscope and we're going to get a closer look at that can tab and at the candles. And besides getting images, which microscopes are great at doing, right? The EVO scanning electron microscope allows us to zoom in at a very high magnification onto surfaces, but we'll also be doing a technique called EDS. This is a kind of X-ray spectroscopy. In other words, it just lets us see what elements are present. This is kind of like an investigation into what is present, and that is where we're going to try finding what are the compounds, potentially metals. My hypothesis is that it's going to be some metals in these candles. So let's check that out. So now let's take a look at our can top. So we'll just double click that. And here's the edge of the lid. And one area that I think will be really interesting to check out here is where I actually broke it off from the body of the can. Just double click there. And right here we see a fracture face. And this is, to material scientists, usually pretty interesting. Here we see where it kind of broke off. And then we have what's called a fracture face here. And we could actually see the internal structure of the aluminum and how it tore away. So let me just continue to zoom in. Before we move away from this area, I want to use a different detector. So what we're using now is our secondary electron detector. That's going to give us a lot of this topography information. Where it's bright is because it's facing towards that detector. But what I want now is to check out the backscatter electron signal. So I could come up here and choose my backscatter electron detector, my BSD. This information coming from these electrons is going to give me some material contrast, and this is going to come up later when we want to look at those crayons. Go to this area, and we can even do a dual channel image where I want one of these channels to be the secondary detector, and we can still keep the backscatter detector there. Let's set this to an even 1000x magnification and press save. So I am curious on what elements perhaps are these higher density spots. And it's a good way for me to get my EDS detector ready. And I'm now going to bring my detector in. So we'll switch this over to here, and we should see it come in from the left-hand side. That looks good to me. All right, let's do Aztec 1. All right, so I've started up Aztec here. Let's go ahead and scan in the image. Let's see what elements we come up with here. So unsurprisingly, majority aluminum, but it does seem to be finding a little bit of manganese and iron, or rather magnesium and iron. And yes, seems like those little bits. Wow, look at that. So we're already getting a really nice clue that this isn't pure aluminum and that there seems to be some other metals in this area. So this technique is showing us that not only were we able to see that there were maybe different kind of metals based off of that backscatter electron imaging, but now this is from the X-ray signal coming from those areas specific to certain elements, and this EDS detector stands for energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy. Now we're getting this really cool composite image. Now we hope to do the same thing with our birthday candles. So now that we know this is working well for a metal and this can tab, so happy birthday to our Evo. It had its beer. Now it's time for its cake and candles. So now let's move to show the first sample. And we should see the material start charging. That is the case. So now let me go to variable pressure. So here it is with our low vacuum secondary detector. But now let's see how it looks like with our backscatter detector. And we'll even do dual channel. Okay, let's see what we got here. Clearly we have the wick. I'm going to want to inspect that. Let's zoom into like an area like this where we have both the wick and some of the wax, and then we'll do some EDS down in there. There's an interesting area where we see something brighter. Very strong sulfur signal. Interesting. Strong sulfur there. And this other one, we also saw sulfur in the wick. And then some phosphorus and aluminum. All right. Let's move on. So that's the blue candle. Now let's move over to the purple. Oh man, what a mess we made of this, right? The material is just so crumbly. But it looks like I still have, part of the wick here. There's part of the wick, and then we also have some of the other material. There's some bright spots here, which could be interesting to look at. We'll center it. And we'll do our dual channel. Excellent. Now let's figure out what we're working with here. Let's go right into the wax here, wax here. Now we'll look at the wick. Definite potassium signal. Interesting. Okay. That seems like the unique one there. Wow, there's a lot more concentrated in and around the wick. Maybe they have put it in the wick and some of this is just rubbed off. I'll say there's definitely a big K to that. What were we seeing in the other one? No, that's where we just saw there's like a strong S. But, wow. Definite potassium that we see are interesting there. Huh. Okay. All right, let's move on to the last one. The green one. I think this one was, to my eye, the most obvious. See some other kind of bright things in there. Now let's zoom in. In an area where there's the wick. See what's going on with the wick portion. Then the wax. Let's see what this is. Maybe they make them differently. Maybe some of them they put it in the wick. Calcium. That's putting the most interesting label there. They all seem to have the phosphorus and sulfur, which could just be a component of the wax that they use. Let's see what that little bright spot is. Copper. That's it. There's pieces of copper in it. That's exactly what we were looking for. Copper, calcium, hint of iron. so we can look at our little live spectrum as we drive around as well. It's another way to analyze it. So we're on the blue. Yeah, we're destroying this stuff. It's a little beam sensitive. Okay. And just to show we're calibrated, if it came over to the tin, this is our tin beads. And there we see our tin beads. All right. Well, that's been an exciting adventure for our EVO's 21st birthday. This EVO, of course, is not 21 years old, but we'll do a little research now and figure out if what we found on the EDS makes sense. Wow. So I think that was a fitting use of the EVO on its birthday. Those candles really did surprise me. I really liked where the wick and the wax was interplaying, and it seemed one of the first conclusions I came to is that the things that might be causing the color are in the wick portion, not so much in the wax. And the more I thought about it, I really was impressed by the challenge that these candle makers must have had. So I have done some research. Let's actually go over to a program I have running on here. This is called ZenConnect. We typically use this for doing a correlative workflow between our optical instruments and our electron instruments, but it's also just really nice just for a data set that we have just from a single imaging session. So what you're looking at is that picture I mentioned right at the start when we loaded the sample and took a picture of the sample carousel. And all the data that I took on the microscope is right here in context with it. So for example, when we went to go look at the aluminum can tab, here is that very first image that we took. And if we then zoom out, I could even find the tiny area that we had zoomed into of where that fracture face was. And we could get a nice idea of the scale here too. That's a 20 micron scale bar. And so here's that fracture face of the aluminum can tab from that, beer that we gave the EVO for its 21st. So coming back to these candles, I have done a little research on what potentially could be causing the color. We got evidence from the EDS. Let's take a look at this blue one. I thought this was just a really cool picture of where you see the wick material and the wax. This is all done in variable pressure, so there's no metal coating or anything here. And with the EDS, I don't think we found anything special within here. From my research, it should be some calcium, maybe calcium chloride. Funny enough, we did see that in the green candle. This might be that I just didn't target the right area, but for the other candles, we got some bona fide evidence, and my research that I've done since really lines up with it. So here's some images from the purple candle. I actually found a really bright strip of silver, and from what I could find, silver didn't really give any noticeable color to a fire, but it might help stabilize the production of the flame, or maybe it had something to do with the production process and incorporating these metals in. But from what we found in the purple candle, remember I got that really nice potassium peak when we saw that peak and it showed K on there. And from my research, I found that potassium chloride does, when put in a flame test, produce a really nice lavender purple color. Now, when we saw it burning, it wasn't super obvious to me. Maybe that's because there's only small little parts they brought into the wick. That was the same story with the green one as well. So here over on the green candle, we see another very similar structure. And I think it was within this region here where we saw some small of those high density bits. And I think also in a location like here, you can see with the backscatter detector, we see some pieces of metal that was incorporated in this wax region right next to where the wick is. And same over here as well. where you can see these bright little inclusions of these little flakes of metal, and we got that copper signal. And it didn't take much research to find that, yes, copper, and specifically if you're looking for the compound, I believe it's a copper sulfate salt that they add in here, and when that's put in a flame test, that produces a green color. You know, it's the oxidation of copper. That's exactly what you see for an old penny, right? It also turns green, and it turns out that's also the color of flame that the copper makes. And kind of putting it all together, knowing that it's these small bits of metal, you'd think we would see that in the candle. And I'm actually going to quickly go back to the cake video and skip ahead to this part right when we change the camera here. Watch the flames for the blue and purple one. See those little sparks? I think those are the pieces of metal burning. And when those burn, you actually start to see a little more intense of that color, especially for the purple one. So I think we've cracked the mystery of these candles. But as this video shows, if you're looking for a big, impressive cake, those candles just aren't that bright. They really don't wow as much as I think you want them to, but those green ones, that does look pretty magical. So I think this is a fitting birthday for our Evo. We got to use the microscope itself to solve a birthday mystery. And before I go, I just want to give a little bit of a retrospective to our Evo and something that we can, celebrate about the Evo together. There was a great video made by our marketing team. I think this was about 5 years ago, but it's really nice. And let's watch it together and remember the Evo and what it...
Evo Scanning Electron Microscope, 10 highlights in 90 seconds. Examine samples down to the nanoscale to reveal greater detail in routine inspection and failure analysis. Enable success even for novice users through intuitive imaging controls and easy navigation. Detect elemental contrast and chemical composition to thoroughly understand your samples. Investigate entire workpieces thanks to the large chamber and heavy load stage. Accelerate large area imaging with automatic adjustment of focus, brightness, and contrast. View non-conductive samples without the need for coating or other preparation methods. Expand your inspection with automated particle analysis to determine sources of contamination. Use automation to measure small feature and generate measurement reports. Segment complex micrographs efficiently using machine learning algorithms. Enable correlative workflows to separate imaging from post-acquisition analyses.
So with that, that comes to the end of our 30th micro minute here. If you have any questions, the chat I'll keep open. We could keep, if you have any questions, do check out our upcoming workshops. And in fact, for the Evo, we have some announcements on our website as well, probably from the link in the description, that we even will have a new stage for the Evo. So we're still innovating on this platform. And thank you very much for your time.